All right. So in previous examples, previous videos, I was talking about like, okay, we can take an image and we can load it in, or you can bring it in. Eventually, we'll talk about how to bring it into another composition. Let's talk a little bit about cropping. Okay, so you might have an image, and rather than trying to resize the image in terms of being bigger or smaller, you might want to remove part of that image. So here, we have this image, and we got a little bit of a photobomb going on here. So what we could do is, if you have Photoshop, I'm going to go about five down from the top, and it's the crop tool here. And when you click on the crop tool, it's going to give you these little widgets that kind of sit on the side there. And this allows you to crop your image. So I'm going to bring it in a little. I'm going to bring it in a little. I'm going to bring it in a little. All right. You can hit done, or you can hit return, or you can hit the little check mark that's over here in the toolbar. Any of those would work. I'll hit done. And I've cropped or changed my image. Now, keep in mind that when you crop an image, you are changing the dimensions of it, usually smaller. So, I'm going to undo this. And normally, if I go to image and image size, you can see that my document or my image here in terms of pixel width is about 950 by 534. What I'm going to do is if I bring this in and crop it as such and hit done or hit return or enter, and I were to go, let's crop it a little more, just a smidge. All right, there we go. And let's go back and take a look at this. And you can see that it's definitely changed its size. You know what I mean? It's definitely smaller, at least half in terms of the width. Smaller in terms of the height. I don't remember the exact, but it's smaller. Now, sometimes that's fine. We don't care. And sometimes that might matter very much. It really kind of depends on your situation. Sometimes you want to have your document be a specific dimensions, and sometimes it's less important. It kind of depends on the situation. But you could do that where you kind of crop out part of your document. Sometimes you might want to crop to a particular size or ratio. Right now, this is what we call just a regular sort of free transform where I can kind of crop it however I feel like it. But I could use this option up here in my toolbar here called ratio. Ratio means the ratio between the width and the height. So for instance, if I were to put 1 by 1, what I'm really saying here is I want my document to go 1 pixel in the width by every 1 pixel down. In other words, the width and height are going to be the same. In other words, I'm making like a square. And so if I were to come here, I'm going to get this square image. I'm going to undo this. And besides, setting a ratio, you can also, maybe I want to set a very specific width. So, for instance, maybe just for the sake of argument, I want my image to be, 500 pixels by 500 pixels. I could put in that exact amount, 500 pixels by 500 pixels. Okay. This is your width, this is your height. Make sure to put in your measurement. In this case, if it's pixels, it's px. If you're doing some other measurement, it depends on what you're doing. And if I were to come in, whoa, sorry about that. Let me try that again. All right, I come in here, press done. All right, you can see now that my image has been cropped specifically to 500 by 500. Okay. All right, I want to talk a little bit about Canvas. All right, so let me grab an image real quick in Photoshop. I don't know. Let me go back to that cute picture of I have a picture I downloaded from Pexels about this cat. And this image is currently 640 by 380 roughly. All right. And let's just resize it. So if I were to resize this image to be 300, it it takes everything in the document and shrinks it. Or the opposite would happen if I were to enlarge this and make it like, I don't know, 1200. Once again, it takes everything and it doubles it, right? It makes everything bigger. What if I didn't want the content of my project to grow? I just wanted the canvas itself to get bigger so I could have more space to do things, draw or some other element there. So what I can do is rather than using the image size option, I'm going to go to image and I'm going to go to canvas size. So when you change the size of your canvas, take a look here. You're not resizing the image bigger or smaller. The content stays the same, but the canvas that you can work on gets bigger or smaller. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and let's go to the exercise 10, and I'm going to go under canvas size. And currently my document's about, 900 by 850. Just for the sake of argument, I'm going to make this 1500 by, I don't know, 1500. Okay. This is going to increase the amount of space that's in my canvas as a whole. You can even say where you want that space to go. I could have that space go above or below or to the upper right or to the upper left or something along those lines. I'm just going to have it go out in all directions just for now. And I'm going to hit OK. And you can see that the size of my deer did not get, the content of the deer did not change. It just made my canvas bigger so that eventually, if I wanted to do something like, say, draw or something, don't worry about how I did this, but I could do that. Okay, I'm going to undo this by doing an edit undo. I could also make the canvas smaller. Technically, if you make the canvas smaller, it's a little bit like cropping because the image is not allowed to resize like it would if you were resizing it, if you change the dimensions with image size. So by cropping it or by changing the canvas smaller, some of your image is going to have to get cropped. It's kind of like taking a photo and let's say you had a photo and you wanted to get it into a picture frame that was smaller than the size of the photo. The only way to do that would be, cutting or cropping some of it off. So if I were to do maybe like, I don't know, 300 by 300, the only way this is going to work is if my some of the picture of the deer is cropped. And if I hit OK, it's going to warn me the new canvas size is smaller than the current canvas size. Some clipping, aka cropping, will occur. I'm going to say that's cool, proceed, and then I get this, which is not really what I want, but this is what happens. And my document is now, my canvas is 300 by 300. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about converting file format. All right, so I talked earlier about um, the idea of a raster format. A raster image format is any image format that saves image data as pixels arranged in rows and columns. Okay. Examples of that would be like a JPEG, PNG, GIF file, TIFF file. The default of Adobe Photoshop is the Photoshop document or the PSD. That's usually the one I would recommend if you're going to work inside of Photoshop. That way it maintains all of your data. If you can, if you save it as one of these other, it's possible that some of your data could get lost. And I can get into that a little deeper. Now, the thing about this is that although I recommend using a PSD if you're going to use Photoshop, not all graphic design programs can work with PSDs. A Photoshop document is a proprietary format. It's owned by Adobe. So if you're using software that isn't Adobe based, they may or may not work with it. And so in that situation, what you would probably have to do is convert your Photoshop document into another raster format, one that maybe can work inside of that other program. Now, if you stay in the Adobe ecosystem, you're usually fine. For instance, we're going to use Adobe After Effects. Since it's an Adobe product, it knows how to handle a PSD file. But for instance, when I teach, say, the 3D class using Blender, Blender does not accept Photoshop documents because it's a proprietary format. So if you want to convert it, what we're going to do is do what's called a save as. I'm going to come to my file here and I'm going to do File, Save As. And then under here, notice how it kind of usually defaults to Photoshop. I'm going to click on Save as Copy. This is going to allow me to convert to other formats easily. So under Format, this is where I can choose other raster formats like a JPEG, PNG, GIF file. For those of you who are doing web development, a AVIF or WebP are usually, considered are starting to grow as popular formats. So let's say I wanted to convert this to a JPEG. I'm just going to call this export test.jpg. Okay, I'm going to hit save. We're not going to worry about all these settings right now. That's not really the point of this. You can go into a deep dive in YouTube later about that if you really want to. And I'm also going to save this as a GIF file or a GIF file. So I'm going to go here, save as copy, and let's save this as a GIF file. I'm going to call this export test.gif. Same, I'm just going to hit OK. I'm not going to, worry about all these settings at the moment. And what I'm going to do is actually bring these images that I just exported back into Photoshop. Remember, Photoshop can work with pretty much any standard raster image format. So JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, AVIFs, TIFF files, all of these are formats that would, you can easily bring into Photoshop. And I want to kind of get into a little bit about understanding conversion. Okay. And I want you to kind of think about it in the regards of languages. Okay. Think about how languages are converted from one language to another, or translated, I should really say. So, like, if you have English, you can translate what you say in English into Spanish, into Russian, into Thai, into Swahili, whatever language you'd like to, switch it to, right? And you can convert any language, any written language to any other written language. You can convert Chinese to German, Japanese to, I don't know, Portuguese, so on and so on, right? Now, even though you can convert languages, sometimes there's certain ideas or concepts or words or phrases that don't really easily translate between the languages. Even though they're both written languages, this concept is known as lost in translation, where it's like, the concept doesn't quite exist, or it's like a little different, usually because of cultural backgrounds and blah, blah, blah. So here's the deal. When you take photo data and you convert it from one format to another, the way that the data is saved is not always exactly the same. And sometimes some data is lost, or some of the details might get translated a little bit weird. And you have to understand that. So for instance, here, this right here is a PSD file. This is the default of Photoshop. And I'm going to go in here, and this is, I want to make sure they're exactly the same size. This is a JPEG of the same image. Okay, now I want you to look at both. And they're the same magnification and all that, so there's no difference in terms of anything. And if you look at them, they're about the same in terms of quality, right? Um, but if you actually look at the original Photoshop document, you might notice that over here on the right side, see how there was these layers of separated content? See how I can like manipulate them, right? And then if I go over here to the JPEG, all of that data is lost. It got compressed into one single individual layer. And that's because the way that, JPEGs work, JPEGs don't understand the concept of multiple layers or additional layers, whereas like Photoshop documents and TIFF files would allow for that. So just understand that converting that affects that, because you have all these layers, and it has to get, it gets converted basically. This over here is a GIF file, and I'm going to blow this up to maybe about 400%, and I'm going to blow this up to about 400% so that you can kind of see. So here's my original, and then here's this one. See how there's like a lot of this like weird speckling here? This is because GIF files themselves, they only can have a maximum number of 256 colors, okay? And that's just the way that that particular image format works. So what's happened is if you have something with more colors, like a normal Photoshop document probably has millions and millions of colors, The way that it converts it is by basically doing this, it's called dithering, which is like it's trying to create these like weird optical illusions to like form these other colors because it doesn't have the ability to make them. Okay. So my point that I'm trying to get across here, also it only doesn't support multiple layers either, is that when you convert, there are situations where you might have to convert one format to another, but you need to understand a little bit the basics of the format. Does the format allow for multiple layers? Does it allow for transparency? Does it allow for animation? These are all factors that go into it. So a little research into how the different raster formats work makes it easier when you want to convert one to another. Okay. All right, so that was bibbidi bobbidi boom. What was that? That was 8, 9, 10, and 11, please. Okay.